welcome everyone to our Fika Talks. This is our third session on our Fika Talks, brought to you by the Swedish-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I'm the chairman, Lars Ruuth, and this is of course brought to you by Volvo. And just so you all know, our presenting partner Volvo is providing an opportunity to enjoy a 7-day luxury driving experience in the elegantly Scandinavian designed Volvo. We're picking our draw winner and announcing it after the event today in our newsletter. So our Fika series, what is Fika? Fika is a Swedish phenomenon where everybody at the workplace takes a few minutes out of their busy day to get a cup of coffee, re-energize, reset, etc. The conversations, however, are the ones that are interesting. I mean, often, yes, of course, we spend a little time on the hockey or the social events going on, but very often we venture into interdisciplinary talks. People meet, interesting discussions take place, and you learn and share from each other. And that's what we want to achieve with our Fika series here as well. So on that note, I do want to encourage everybody to participate, to ask questions, and to share your own experiences and make comments, because we're all here to learn. We got a very interesting program today where we have Andrew Parravano from Volvo, who will be part of sharing what Volvo is doing in the arena of employer branding, etc. And we have Poyan Karimi, the CEO of OddWork, who's going to share some very interesting thoughts on employer branding as well. I'm going to let our new member, Ayers, who's very versed in this area, to introduce Poyan, and then we'll get the conversation started shortly.
Cool. Thank you, Lars. Great introduction. I've watched Poyan and OddWork evolve over the last 10 years, and it's been an exciting trip to witness. OddWork's a great example of how quickly digitalization and technology impacts a whole industry. It's an example of how small companies can impact large, and it can happen really, really quick. An industry that needed to pivot quickly because of digitalization to stay relevant, and tech and COVID have only made that more and more challenging. But in the midst of that, OddWork has evolved and created opportunity, because I believe they've had their finger on the pulse of some really important subjects. And I credit Poyan's leadership style as being a key reason for OddWork's success, quite frankly. He's a deep thinker and a deep listener, and he's able to translate that in communication. It's all about we and not me. And that translates into creating a culture that everybody wants to be part of today. And speaking to the younger generation, it becomes inherently more and more important. So if you haven't been impacted or participated in an OddWork event, I encourage you to do so and join and subscribe, because you'll be inspired to good things, and sit back and listen to Poyan. He's got some real important subjects and experience to share with us today. So Poyan, with that, do your magic.
Adam, thank you. Thank you for the very kind words. And that is a very, very good reputation for me to live up to now in the following 15 minutes. And I'll see how I will handle that. We'll see that together. I'll start sharing my screen. And hi, everyone, and welcome to these Fika sessions. I am Poyan Karimi. Very nice to meet you all. And my first time also, even if it's digital, to interact with the Canadian audience or audience on the North American side of the world. So we're very, very happy to be here. My name is Poyan Karimi. I have a good reputation to live up to, I hear from Adam, and I look forward to take you through a brief introduction of employer branding from strategy to tactic, as I call it. And since we have a short period of time, I will get going right away. The agenda for these 15 minutes looks quite intense, and it probably will be. And I hope that after these 15 minutes, you will have had a brief overview of what is employer branding. Is it ice creams, balloons, and ping pong tables, or is it something more concrete? And let me just give you a hint. It is. And I hope you guys will get understanding of what we at OddWork and many of our partners work with. And also in relation to that, of course, today's candidate market. After setting some context on employer branding, which will be the first 5 or 6 minutes of this presentation, I will just give you guys a suggestion of an employer branding roadmap, as we call it, and how you can view employer branding as a strategic focus area, and how a strategy can be divided into specific tactics, and those tactics are the ones to focus on to actually deliver a change, a walk down a journey with employer branding. A great example of a tactic was presented at the last Fika Talk, I know, by Winning Temp, for example, and I will give you some suggestions on more tactics as well. Finishing my presentation will be the key takeaways. So I will give you guys some key takeaways to take with you, and before we move on in the schedule, and there will be some both polling and discussions throughout the presentation and afterwards. Just a brief background about OddWork. We're an employer branding company founded approximately about 10 years ago, but we were founded as a recruitment company once upon a time in Gothenburg, Sweden, the home of Volvo, for example, and SKF. Back then, there were a lot of recruitment firms out there that asked all the candidates to add their resume and check some boxes what they want to work with. But we, as newly graduates, we didn't see the recruitment firms as our friends, as our allies. We saw them as asking us to provide all this info and then basically selling our CVs to companies. So we figured, what happens if you start a very candidate-focused recruitment company? Basically a company that treats your candidates the absolute best. And if you do so, you will get the best candidates coming to you, and you have the best, if you have the best candidates, you will probably over time get the best customers or the best organizations that want to recruit from you. So we started a recruitment firm 10 years ago, and that growth was fast, and it was exciting, and it was fun, and we spent a lot of time and effort and money and love and everything on building a very strong internal culture and communicating that culture to our external target groups. Why? Well, because we wanted the external target groups to apply for their next job via OddWork, because that was our business model. So what is now called employer branding was simply a very, very integrated part of our business from the very start. 4 or 5 years ago, our partners, Volvo, actually being the first one, started calling us saying, OddWork, instead of helping us with our recruitment, couldn't you guys help us with our employer branding, develop that internal culture, strong and right internal culture, and the external communication to our target groups so that they can find us without using you as a middleman? And when that question came 5 years ago, we understood that, wow, okay, we should evolve into an employer branding company, which we have. And today, OddWork works with many companies that you might know the name of, AstraZeneca being one, the Swedish defense company, Saab being another, Kindred, one of the world's biggest betting companies, is a third, and many others, also small companies, in regards to their employer brand. So what is employer branding? Well, I think one of the best definitions of employer branding is to be found on Wikipedia. And it states, employer branding is simply the perception of a company as an employer among current, former, and future employees. And just as a company always has one or more consumer brands, all companies, whether you want it or not, always have an employer brand. And to exemplify this, we usually show this picture. And I will see if the polls are working here, because I just want to launch a poll and ask you guys in the room, would you buy a pair of sneakers from this company? Just seeing the brand, just seeing the logotype of the company. I see the answers coming in from the room. I'll give you a couple of more seconds before ending the polling, sharing the results. And we ask these questions in many different rooms. I have approximately 80% of the room already answering, so I'm ending the poll, and the results are quite clear. 80% of the room stating that absolutely, I will buy a pair of sneakers from this company. 20% of the room saying no, I wouldn't. And when no matter what room we are in, we usually ask why would you buy a pair of sneakers from this company? And the answers are usually, I like them. I know their history. I know their quality references. I know athletes that wear them, or other answers that sum up to 80% or 90% in every room that we ask that question. And the 10 or 20% saying no, usually connected to other favorite brand, Adidas or Reebok or something like that. Let me just rephrase that very question. To the same room, would you guys work for this company? And let me be very honest also, I'm not looking for an absolutely yes or absolutely no answer here at all. We know from asking this question, and we have 90% of the room already answered, we see that 29%, and that's a quite familiar number, say absolutely. But we do see that 12 or 71% of the room answer not sure. And that is a quite big difference in regards to Nike's consumer brand and their employer brand, because Nike have been very, very, very successful throughout the years to give us the answers in regards to wearing a pair of sneakers from their brand. We know all about it. It doesn't matter where in the world we're out talking, we know how it is to wear a pair of sneakers from Nike. However, when we ask the question of working there, different questions pop up. How is the leadership? What are their strategic goals? How can my career develop? The absolutely different questions in regard to working there than to buying a pair of sneakers. And a Swedish music app, Spotify, or a US social media, or a US search engine has been very successful in giving the answers on how it is to actually work there. And that is the difference of the consumer brand versus the employer brand. And so employer branding is basically about retaining current and attracting new employees on today's talent market. And why is this important? Well, let's just dream of a post-corona world for a second and think about going to Barcelona. So we're going to Barcelona. What a wonderful dream that would be. And we want to book a hotel, right? So we step into a booking site, I guess, a booking site of your choice, booking.com or hotels.com, and we put in Barcelona and our dates. And then we search and we get a list of hotels. Now, would you book the first hotel based on the pictures? 15 years ago, you would have. But now, I'm quite sure that you would read all the information you can find about the hotel, or at least some of the reviews in regards to the hotel. And you will start to build your own mind and perception of how this hotel actually is. Is the hotel photoshopped? Is the pool photoshopped? Or is it actually nice? Is the service good? So different questions, all due to a democratized information flow, so we can get those answers today. And without going into depth into this example, if we do that research for 2 nights in Barcelona, why don't we with our next employer? Of course we will. And many companies are trying to solve those questions. Many of you might know Glassdoor, for example, being a comparison site for companies where employees step in and actually give democratic answers in regards to how it is to work there. And in Sweden, Glassdoor is not at all as big or as in North America. However, that's the way we're headed. So a democratized information flow in regards to organizations will have an impact on all of us, on all of our organizations. So if I am in a short brief of employer branding to give you 2 advices on what to focus on, well, I would just pin it down to 2 points. Work with your internal culture in a structured and systematic way in alignment with your strategic goals. And when you do so, communicate that culture to the right target groups. And I've underlined right, because all target groups are not relevant. If we work with employer branding, we do not need to communicate to all guests to invite them to our hotel. Only the absolutely best within our field, which would be employer branding in our case. And one of the most and your most important target groups are obviously your current employees. And the most common question we get from our customers, no matter size, no matter global or national or local organizations, is where to start. So after just setting some context in regards to employer brand, where we're headed, democratized information flows, I will just offer a little system that you guys could use as well in your own organizations on the question where to start. Because if we state that employer branding is a two-way work, it's internal culture and it's external communication. And then just take a look at what employer branding does and why it is important. I will suggest this picture first of all. Okay, so employer branding, is it just a good to have? Is it a nice to have? Is it a fun to have? Well, it would be if it was about the ping pong tables and the nice offices and everything, but it's not really, because organizations, they do have strategic goals, right? We have to become this or achieve this or grow like this or whatever that strategic goal might be. To be able to do so, organizations need what's called strategic workforce planning, basically looking at the competencies right now, looking at the competencies needed to reach the strategic goal, measure the gaps, and build a plan for filling those gaps to be able to reach their strategic goals. That's when employer branding comes absolutely essential, to actually be able to have a culture internally that can fill that gap, and an external communication that actually offers help into that journey. That then translates into HR strategy or recruitment strategy. So let's just make a picture of the employer branding journey that I hope can be valuable to you guys as well. Because if we paint a picture of a strong or weak culture on the y-axis, and we put the low external brand awareness and the high external brand awareness on the x-axis, we can start to discuss a current state and a future state. So let's say if a position would be up to the left, that would mean that our internal culture is great. It really is. It truly, really is. The pictures are not photoshopped, but no one knows about it. If a position would be down to the right, that would be the exact opposite. We are painting a picture externally that is simply not true. The pool picture is indeed Photoshop, but it's a very good Photoshop picture. And many of our partners start here. Where should we start? Well, obviously by analyzing and understanding our current position. Let's say that for company X, the current position would be our internal culture is lacking and not too many of our target groups know about us. And I can assure you that the desired position of 100% of our customers is obviously up to the right. We have an amazing internal culture and all the relevant candidates know about it. But when we have a current position and a desired position, we do also have an employer branding journey. And when we have an employer branding journey, it is a perfect conversation starter to talk about the strategy. And the strategy is basically the answer to the questions: what key challenges do we have? Are there what internal challenges do we have? What external communication challenges do we have? And then companies like ours build fancy strategies on how to take on those key challenges. However, a strategy will never make the job by itself. That is just addressing the challenges ahead. The tactics will. Specific tactics developed in line with the strategy that addresses the challenges ahead is how an employer branding journey is taken from a current position step by step by step by step to a desired future position. Is this easy work? It is not. And we would never consider HR or marketing as a one-off tactic. Let's just do one brand project for our marketing and forget about it for the 5 years, for next coming 5 years. Or let's just do one HR initiative and then we will just forget about it for the next 5 years. That is not how we address HR marketing, and that is not how we should address employer branding either. So what are examples of tactics? Well, I know that Winning Temp was the guest of the last Fika Talk. So real-time employee service, an absolute fundamental tactic, obviously. For an example, if needed in that very organization, if the internal focus should be addressed, or onboarding programs or leadership value proposition or career development programs could be examples of tactics on the internal focus. On the external communication, we all have heard about employer value propositions, which is basically the value proposition of why to work at a place or why to stay at a place, why to stay at an employer, to actually make those offers very, very clear. Or communication strategies or advertising or employer branding video. You've heard all about this. And just to give you guys an example of what we're working at right now, we're developing a employer branding tactic right now. I don't have the time to show you, but I will hopefully in a future Fika Talk. Basically a video bot, which is going on to websites today. You will see on many websites, you will see a chat box pop up in the down right corner. just change that chat box to humans. Change that to employees of a company answering questions on how it is to work at their company. That is exactly where we're going, with authentic, honest, true communication from inside the hotel. And with a big respect for the time and for the schedule of today, I will not go in any further into the employer branding journey or any more specific tactics. However, I will just send you some key takeaways from this short little presentation. Keep the hotel perspective on your employer brand. View yourself as the hotel, and take the discussion on where to address the questions as if you were a hotel. Do you need to renovate the hotel itself, or do you need to work on the marketing of the hotel and the knowledge of it? Analyze your current and desired position. Identify your key challenges to reach that desired position. However, the strategy itself won't do any of the work, so translate those challenges into an EB strategy that is then translated to key tactics. Prioritize those tactics and execute on them. And that is a very brief overview of how you take employer branding from nothing to do with ice creams, balloons, and ping pong tables to a strategic employer branding journey from strategy to tactic. I hope I was clear. And with that, guys, I would also just like to add that on the 22nd of September, we do have Employer Branding Summit, which is a global event. Last time we had 808 attendees from all over the world, hosted by OddWork with many of our partners and top of the line employer branding professionals from all over the world joining in. Please join us. I will send out an invitation to everyone joining here today. And with that, thank you very much. Happy employer branding to all of you.
Thank you very much, Poyan, for packing so much interesting information in such a short presentation. Very, very interesting, and I made a note about the summit you just talked about. What we're going to do now is we're going to just have a short introduction to learn a little bit how Volvo's journey has gone, and then we're going to invite all of you to participate. So at that point, we're going to open up for all kinds of questions within the topic. But first, I just want to do a quick introduction of Andrew Parravano. Andrew has been part of the Volvo family for over 20 years. He's began his career at what they call the retail level, which is basically a dealership, right, with the parts and service and then sales, and then he took the step over to Volvo corporate, working for the Volvo group. Of course, I'm taking some shortcuts in the description now, but that's that. What he's in charge of today is Volvo Car Canada's customer service business, right, which is such a key element in how you relate on the brand, because of course, you know, your relationship with your dealership, with your people you meet there, and the customer service people is really going to impact how happy you are with your car or in ownership. So it really reflects on your business. Andrew, we'll let you in. I know you have a story on your career at Volvo, and tell us a little bit about your personal experience and seeing Volvo culture, etc. Up close and personal, and making the decision there.
Okay, so thank you. For me, it actually started very, very early. My father actually drove nothing but Volvo since the mid '70s, and I can remember as a young boy him taking me to the dealership whenever you know he needed to look at a new vehicle, etc. And I was just in awe of everything that I saw. He would bring home brochures, and I would sit at home and read through them. So very, very early, I was very, very interested in cars. When it came time for me to sort of enter the job market, I ended up getting a job at a dealer in the Greater Toronto area. I started in the workshop, sweeping floors and fixing cars. I made my way through being a service advisor, which is arguably one of the most difficult jobs in a dealership. I worked through the parts department, and eventually I began to sell cars. And I had some really unique opportunities. I had a great opportunity to work at a very family-run type business, and that really aligned to Volvo culture and Volvo's brand values. I had an opportunity at one stage to be interviewed by the CBC, which was a very, very interesting and educational experience for me. And I think it's here that I really began to make this sort of transition between you have in your life things that are your hobbies that you do on the weekend, and then you have in your life your job. And for a lot of people, those two ideas are sort of two separate things. But for me, working through Volvo, they really began to become one. That culture sort of transpired everything in my personal life. You can sort of see behind me, there's some pictures of some old Volvo cars on the wall. I'm a through and through Volvo geek. I have a few old Volvo cars as well, and it's really exciting now that even my son, who's 6 years old, gets a real kick out of being able to work on them and come to work with me and come to, on occasion to dealerships as well. So for me, it's really become woven very much into both my work life, but also my personal life as well.
So very much an affinity, and of course, the first you came across Volvo was with the brand of the car, and now you're more into it. So it's the employer part of it, and building the brand from a employer perspective. Can you talk a little bit how you and the rest of the managed team at Volvo, how do you translate the Volvo values into the talent today and attracting talent for the future?
So I think that the brand has changed very, very drastically over the last couple of years. I mean, traditionally, Volvo was a very conservative brand. Today, it's a brand that's very much on the cutting edge of new technology. Bold decisions in terms of what we're doing with our electrification strategy. We're making very, very public announcements around how we take care of our employees. And I think that that's a major way to be able to attract talent. I think once you attract the talent too, we can begin to show employees what are so important to us and how that aligns to their personal brand values and their personal ideals of what they want to do in sort of their own personal life. And for me, one of the things you really can make a connection with people is how our brand values really, really do align with a lot of people's personal brand as well.
Yeah. Thanks. We had one example that was announced by Volvo earlier this year from a global perspective, and there was that Volvo would give every employee, wherever they are in the world, 6 months of parental leave and covering 80% of their salary. I know in Canada that's already been the case for quite a while, but that's a signal also to younger people looking for employment that, hey, we're willing to make these investments in young parents, if you will, when it comes to that. Can you talk a little bit about your view on that, and on other initiatives by Volvo, and how that reflects on both the employers, but I guess also the consumers when they hear things, helps build the consumer brand?
Yeah, I think it's critically important that we invest in people. I mean, I have a young son. I remember when he was just born. I mean, I think these sorts of investments are absolutely critical to be able to allow people to have this very healthy balance between things that they would like to be able to do in their personal life, but also, having to, we all have to get up and go and have a job sort of every single day. So I think for us, it's extremely important that in the modern workplace, we pursue flexibility and we make sure that we're investing in people. And I think the more that we can continue to support them, the more that they support us. And I think, that works in a much, much more positive way to get everybody rowing in the same direction and contributing to a real environment of collaboration and help, and a really strong team culture and team spirit as well.
Thank you. We can involve Poyan in this as well. Poyan, an initiative like this from Volvo, where you're focusing on obviously maybe younger employees. From your perspective, what's your take on this, and what kind of impact do you see these measures having when it comes to the employer branding?
No, I think it's brilliant. I mean, just our recruitment company, one of the biggest recruitment companies in the world, Randstad, just released their employer brand research today, showing that in Sweden, salary and benefits only rank number 5 in importance for candidates when choosing a new job. That is ranked number 2 globally. So that's much more important in a global sense than in Sweden. And Sweden already have a great setup of benefits that are not as usual in the world. So for Swedish companies, especially, that offers a huge opportunity, obviously, to implement measures that are already implemented in the local markets on a global market. We know also from different cases that different target groups have different we develop different value propositions in different target groups. We know that as Australia, salary ranks much higher, whereas in Sweden, values and company culture internally ranks higher. So a global approach, a one size fits all, is basically not possible. You have to have a targeted approach. And for Swedish companies that are already so much ahead in terms of salary and benefits, paternal leave and everything like that, that's a huge opportunity. That is one of the best selling pitches of the hotel. And add to that now a world that has a 14 months intense digital training session with the COVID crisis. Suddenly the talent pool is global. And with a strong offering, you can attract great candidates from all over the world. So it's an interesting time to be alive. And I think these initiatives are nothing but great.
That's interesting. So what you're seeing with your insights too is maybe some Swedish companies will have a little bit heads up or an advantage to this, because many of those employee benefits are already part of the environment and the culture there, and they know how to manage it with the parental leave, etc., etc. It's expected, accepted, and supported. Are there any other recent initiatives in this regard that you see can sort of be exported or leveraged across the world?
I think one of the examples, I've already mentioned that, but like something as simple as real-time employee service. Okay, so instead of, I mean, that's not a Swedish phenomenon, but Sweden has quite simple hierarchies, not as not as much pyramids as in different countries. And with real-time employee service, for an example, you democratize a very old process in a very, very simple way. And the day that companies, and I know companies in Sweden are discussing this, start actually showing their employee survey numbers on their website, their live employee survey numbers, that will be a game changer. I mean, just imagine is Spotify starting to show exactly how their leadership is reviewed, how their meaningfulness is reviewed, how everything is reviewed. When that happens, and I think Sweden will be, or the Nordic countries will be very early into this, that will be a game changer. That is basically real-time reviews on web pages, and I think that will be exported successfully to all the world. It will take some time. It will take 5-10 years, but eventually the war for talent will be so expensive. So to be able to reach your strategic goals as a company, you have to just follow and do it. So I think examples of easy tactics such as employee service will be showing the way.
Very interesting. Now we're going to open the floor to all our participants. So we're happy to take questions. You can either put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll try to let you in to answer the question in person. Meanwhile, we can go back a little bit to Andrew and the examples at Volvo. Of course, you're in an interesting situation as well, because Volvo is the car company, is the brand, but you're working through the dealerships, through the retail stores. So those are not your direct employees, but of course they're how happy and productive those employees are is going to have an impact on the next car purchase that your consumers make, right? So how does that translate, Andrew? What are some of the things you can do there to positively impact such behavior?
So I think we have to start with, from a leadership standpoint, of always making sure that we are living the brand values. I mean, it's one thing, I think, to sort of have your brand values as a placard on the wall, but all of us in the head office, I think, have to make sure that we're living those values and and that we're making decisions that really ladder up to them in a very, very good way. I think we need to have as much open dialogue and communication with our retail partners on that, so that everybody can see this sort of air of transparency and this sort of, this is the way that, you know, the Volvo system works. I think we often think of, you know, sort of the head office and then the dealer body as completely separate entities. And, you know, then to a certain degree they are. But I think one of the things that we've worked extremely hard on is to break down some of those barriers, really open up the lines of communication to our dealers and have a really good two-way dialogue between us and them. And I think that's a really, really good way to ensure that they get an exposure and an ability to see the Volvo culture and really begin to understand how critically important it is to live that every single day. And I think for us that's been successful. But it is a constant two-way street with transparent and open communication, both on elements of culture and also on elements of business strategy.
Yeah, very good. We got a question for Poyan here. In a successful employer branding journey, where is it driven to be successful? Does it need to come from the absolute top of the company engagement, or where does it come from? Where have you seen some successful examples, and who initiated, who drove, who took ownership?
That's a very good question. It's quite interesting. We've seen just a couple of years ago, the employer branding question was an HR question. And the problem was HR on one side do not have all the answers in regards to employer branding, because employer branding is the wonderful love child of HR and marketing, right? So HR and marketing must work together. And then we saw a couple of years where HR and marketing couldn't work together. So we had a lot of work in making them understand each other. And then the problem was that the top level management didn't understand the value of employer branding, or the effects if it's not successful, if you have a bad employer brand. And then we saw have been seeing for the last couple of years, top level management getting on board, understanding what happens when applicants sum to zero. We get 0 applications for a crucial job and for a crucial position, and suddenly budgets start to wake up, and top level management start to understand the issue, how it must be addressed, and that we have to view it not as a one-off, but as a part of our business, a part of our strategy to reach our goals. So for the last 2 years, the explosion within employer branding has been huge. And I will answer to that question. My answer to that question is top level management must be on board, because if they are not, we will just stand there trying to, with small budgets, trying to do impact. We do not have ownership. We don't have leadership leading the way. And that will not, I mean, what Andrew is talking about here, I mean, the everyday conversations with the stakeholders, that's when the culture matters. I mean, whatever we write an employer value proposition, or these are our values, that is worthless if it's only words, right? It is when it comes down all the way from top level management to the everyday conversation with stakeholders where we get it to live. So I would say that to get the top level management on board is absolutely central. And there's been a lot happening just for the last 2 or 3 years. The evolution has been beautiful to see for the last 5 years.
And as a small follow-up question to that, of course, top management always worries about the return of investment. Are there some key performance indicators that you use or recommend to look at? I mean, obviously, employee satisfaction is an obviously one, but are there other measures that you recommend to look at?
We look at cost of recruitment, employee turnover, for example, as 2 very concrete. Now the English gets hard, but I mean the exact rate of placements. So how many open positions do we have? How do we fill them? How many stay after 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? KPIs like that. So again, that's also a very good question, because this is, again, and I stress this many times, not about the kickoff or the event or the ice creams, balloons, and ping pong tables, as I usually put it. It is about business value So there are many different KPIs, and the most important KPI, obviously, is the KPI that measures the strategic goals. If we are to grow this and that in that market with these competencies, we can read the result of that in 2 or 3 or 5 years' time on the very last line of the results.
Very good, thank you. We have a question as well from George Rizopoulos. How has the millennial generation sorry, I'll start over. How has the millennial generation influenced the speed of change?
Is that for me or for Andrew?
Well, let's ask Andrew first. Andrew, how do you see when you are recruiting young people today, or in the dealerships? Do you see a difference from when you started out 20 years ago?
I would say yes. I think that there are more questions around culture and fit versus once upon a time there were questions around what is the job description. So there's very much been sort of this shift from this very linear, what do I do all day, to this much more fluid, how does this complement my value system and my personal brand? I personally like to start out interviews, especially with asking people to tell them a little bit about themselves, what their career aspirations are, and what they're looking for from an employer. Because I find that a lot of times today that they have a very clear plan on what they want from an employer and what's important to them. And this allows me, I think, in a lot of ways to be able to then indicate how Volvo culture and how the way our company runs can really tether in well with that particular individual. And I think in so doing, I've personally seen a significant success with that, because the cultural fit is extremely important to me. I can teach skills. I can teach you how to run a variety of different reports, and I can teach lots of core competency. I can't teach culture. So you have to, I think it's critically important to fit and to mesh, and for whoever you're employing to have to very much have a vision match in what their priorities are and what your priorities as a culture are. Then you can bring their career along and you can demonstrate to them, I will grow you to where you want to go. And that helps. I think that really makes a big difference.
Wholeheartedly agree. And it's interesting to see that, for instance, a company like Volvo has many things to offer young people: the stance on sustainability, the stance on driving forward, and of course the caring and openness that we often see in sort of Swedish value companies. So that's very positive. Poyan, do you have a comment on that as well with the millennials?
Absolutely, because that's a very good question from George. So the speed of change, how's the millennial generation influenced that? Well, that's pretty interesting. Actually, once upon a time, that was the answer to a question made us and our brand quite famous in Sweden, because as we're coming from the recruitment side, right? So we have 4,000, 5,000 interviews every year with candidates, basically telling us what they're looking for with their employees. So we took those insights and made some assumptions about the future in regards to employer branding and where we're all headed. And then a couple of years later, there was a big Swedish survey and research that came out that basically made our statements and assumptions facts. So we were invited to national TV in Sweden to talk about that question. And the interesting thing is that we don't look at the younger generations to compare generations at all. We're not interested at Oldwork in comparing the millennials with the boomers or this and that, but it is interesting to look at the most recent candidates that have entered the job market to see where we all are headed. So basically what happened with the millennials, and by the way, millennials represent 75% of the global workforce in 4 years, so they're not young anymore. We saw very early that the democratized information flow, basically the fact that we can check everything up with this one right away when we want to, that will have a huge impact. So we are used to researching everything. So we talked with the millennials. We saw that they start research everything. So that doesn't mean that only the millennials have a democratized information flow. We all have, but by looking at the millennials, we can see where we all are headed. So I would say that the millennials, the influence, the speed of change a lot. For all of us, not only for themselves. And suddenly the change that was made that maybe took 10 or 20 years prior to this takes as short of a time as a digitalization process takes, 1 year, 2 years. And for companies not being prepared for that, that has been a major, and is still, that is why we have a business. It is a major issue to do something about right away. And it's just interesting to see with that increase of speed, and let's say it was driven by millennials, what will happen in the future? Will it be slower? I do not think so. And it does not affect, again, just the millennials or the recent candidates that have entered the workforce. It affects us all because we get the same tools in our toolbox.
Thank you very much, Poyan. We are running out of time, but we have a couple of more questions. I think you've struck something when you talked about the employee service and the willingness to put them online or share them. Or the questions are allowed. Where would they be shared? Would you meaning be public with them so everybody can see them, or is it just an internal sharing among the whole company?
No, I would say.
What do you envision?
No, I would say that they will be on a website. I mean, just going back to the hotel example, if I step into a hotel's website today, they will link me to their booking site if their ratings are good. Okay, so read our reviews. Why wouldn't they? That is an absolute great unique selling point. So I just figure that in the future, and we have these discussions with our customers, there will be a separate site on websites, maybe on the career site. And I know some companies already have this, stating this is our culture internally exactly right now. And you will see the scores. And I mean, imagine when that starts getting the new normal. Imagine when candidates start expecting you to show your reviews from inside your generation. That will be a huge game changer, but also, as for the hotels, a great selling point, obviously, to invite new guests to stay at your hotel. And I just got the comment here, if the results are not good, I'm not sure it's a good selling point. Absolutely correct. That's absolutely right. And that's the whole point. That's a great point, because that's the implication this has. If the hotel is not good, it will have a damage on your strategic goals. You will not be able to operate your business in the effective way and reach your strategic goals. So this is not a question of, is it a nice to have? It is an absolute must have when the democratized information flow hits the candidate market.
No, very good. And of course, if you get bad results, you need to rally everybody around. What do we do? How do we change this? Well, how can we change that? What can we do that would be the most impactful for our employees to change this? Of course. So I mean, just knowing it will be better to have that to start the dialogue and the transition to a better position than just hide it and not get there. We're kind of running out of time. I just wanted to give Andrew another opportunity to share some of the thoughts around employer branding and what he sees in the current condition in Canada.
So I think from a Volvo perspective, I think that that some of the things that we see are again getting back to transparency and again getting back to those conversations with employees. You know, one of the things that we do that I think is critically important is just building on what Poyan was saying was, you know, if there are some challenges inside of an organization and you are getting some of these surveys back that are saying, hey, you're strong in this area, but we're weak in this area. I don't think it's just up to the management team to figure out what the right thing to do is, right? I mean, I think you need to have a really good culture where you can sit down with some of the employees and say, what would you do to fix it? You know, I think they've got some brilliant ideas too. They're sitting in the front lines and they can see what some of the challenges are. Right? Maybe it's policies that are being made at this, you know, at a different level that are making it hard for them to satisfy their customers, or our customers, even if they want to. So I think critically, you know, I go back to this idea of having an open dialogue with your employees. You know, we shouldn't be waiting necessarily for them to come in and close the door and say, can we talk? By that stage, it's too late. The fire is already burning. And so really, I think making a conscious effort to go to them and having that dialogue is really, really critical. And I think people also really appreciate being asked for their view and for their advice. And they see that when that's happening, that they're able to make a meaningful difference and meaningful inputs into the direction and the culture of the company. And that makes a huge difference, in my view, in satisfaction. And satisfied employees, there is a cost to turnover. It's a cost to our customers. There's a cost to the corporation. Keeping people is critically important.
Thank you, Andrew. Very, very, very true words. I want to thank Andrew, and I want to thank Poyan for taking the time and sharing with us today all this. We are going to share contact information. So if you have follow-up or you want to learn more about OddWorks or how to get a job at Volvo, we'll make sure that you have